Hello there, everybody. Welcome on in. I hope you can hear and see us okay. We're here in the Mythology and More Research Lab. We've got a lot to talk about tonight. We're going to go ahead and I guess last week, since we talked about serpents and touched on sea snake type serpenty creatures, let's go look at their other finned friends and shelled friends they may or may not hang out with. We've got a co-host backstage. Let's do this.
You say I make you nervous, a tragedy, I'm a beautiful disaster, a reckoning, you wonder how I got this way. You think I'm someone to be saved, someone to clean up and tame. Oh, some things never change, never change. You think I would look pretty on your arm once you cover up my bruises and battle scars, but it always ends the same.
Welcome on back in, everybody. I hope you're doing really well. Hope you're really great. Go ahead and drop in your questions. I've got a co-host. She's over there. I got a co-host over here named Mama Maggie. It's good to see you. Maggie, go ahead and introduce yourself, my friend.
Hello, lovelies. Mama Maggie Ward, independent author, stroke survivor, migraine, oppressed right now, but it happens. And so we're here to talk about mermaids, dolphins, turtles, orcas, and how the things that swim in the sea aren't what we think.
Definitely so, and welcome on in, everybody. It's good to have all of you here. If you want to go ahead and drop your questions live or on the replay, we would love to have you join us. I know Mama Maggie's in chat along with me. Hello, Miranda. It's good to see you. We might have some other friends hop on in, so we're going to go ahead and switcheroonie screens. And as she said, we're looking at mermaids, dolphins, turtles, and more today. So I had thought specifically of the sirens and the rusalaki, depending on how you want to say that, if you want to take the Russian or the Danish pronunciation of that. Did you want to talk about either one of those first, Mama Maggie?
All right. First of all, we got to jump back. Because sirens... The mythology of sirens goes back to the Ovid, to the Iliad, the Odyssey, the Ovid. It goes back to the ancient Greek historians who recorded things. And the thing is for thousands of years, sirens were these winged women. They had a woman's torso and a lower body like a bird. Some of them are presented as being like sparrow-sized with a woman's face. Some of them are presented as being human-sized with a giant bird-like body and claw-like feet. Now, the idea of a siren is that they have very alluring voices. They can they sing to lure sailors to come to their shores, to wreck their boats. And this goes back to the Odyssey, when Odysseus literally had his crewmen tie him to the boat so he wouldn't jump off in the ocean and try to swim to the Sirens' Island. Now, there are multiple sirens that are mentioned throughout history, throughout the Greek history. Agalope, Thexalopia, Agalophenme, Panthenope, Ligeia, Luscos, Apollonius, and Tellus, Radini, Melope, and Thexalopia.
Now, some of those, if you know the story of Jason and the Argonauts, you know that they didn't like each other a lot.
Yeah, these sisters who were sisters and cousins who were the sirens, there were good guys and there were bad guys. And the Greek historian Hygius gives us the names of Tellus, Radini, Melope, and Thelexope. And they were the good guy sirens. Now, there's also Euripides wrote a play called Helen, in which some of them are mentioned. It depends which copy you look at, because you have to understand that this was written 500 to 1,000 years before Common Era. So the documentation has changed in the last 2,500 years. So they are considered the winged maidens. Now, we think of sirens in modern society. We think of the mermaids who sang to lure sailors to their death. Technically, Disney's Little Mermaid, she was a siren.
Yeah, she wasn't very much like Hans Christian Andersen's
technically
mermaids.
She was a siren,
they were more like water sprites.
And that's why the witch wanted her voice, to be able to control the people around her. Now, when did this happen? When did this transition go from this bird-like being to this fish thing? It actually happened during the Middle Ages. And so they started, and if you want to, an idea, this is when a lot of people were going in and out. They were traveling all over the world. The Silk Road was going on. It was all of a thing. And Europeans were then being introduced to the Hindi culture of India, Cambodia, Indonesia, Laos, Burma, all of that area. And that is when the idea of this half fish, half woman, a woman's torso on a fish's body, began infiltrating into westernized European culture. So we're talking like the time of Marco Polo and the Silk Road, of this idea of these fish women that had the tail of a fish or the tail of a serpent, and they lived in the water and they sang. Now, the first one that we know is recorded as a siren that is as a mer person actually goes back to the ancient Sanskrit kingdoms, and one of the avatars of Vishnu was a half fish, half man. So technically, the merman came first.
In a lot of ways, that was kind of the Silk Road's way of like early cultures learning to get along. We now would almost call that assimilation. Almost, not quite. Because kind of leaning into what Miranda's asking, if the sirens were bird-like, how did they survive the ocean? There's a couple different theories on that. One, like a professor I had in college said about the sirens specifically, if the sirens were like some seabirds where they dip into the water before they attack their prey, think like pelicans and whatnot, they tend to do that. You can see where, as a sailor, you might think that creature came out of the water, but that's not where it started. It snuck up on you from the sky, dove in, and then came out through camo, basically. The other thought process is that the bird's feathers, or in this case, kind of like the mermaid scales, acted like, if you think, I think that the video game Legend of Zelda took this with the Zora masks. When Link puts on the Zora mask, it's a scale that he technically puts on his face that the mask is made of, and that scale is what allows him to breathe. I wonder if, kind of like how penguins have longer breathing times, you get what I mean?
Yeah, we also were having a thing about that time is the New World was being discovered. The Spanish Empire was first, of course, getting over there. And they were seeing, there have been legends of the Selkies, of women who put on a fur skin seal and it's a woman underneath. And they would see them peeling off their skin and they would be a tail and upward in the Celtic mythology. But they were also starting to see manatees in Florida, which were they thought manatees were mermaids. And so this idea of if you carve they would carve things on the mast of the ship to scare away the other dangerous sea creatures. And so they thought if they put a mermaid on the bow of the ship, then they could drive away the others. Now there were, in ancient Greek, there were sea nymphs and sea maidens, and it goes back and forth whether they have had thin feet or not, whether they were like the Gorgons or not. Most of the early Gorgons had 2 legs. The exceptions were Echidna and Typhon.
Typhon got the short end of the stick, man. Just saying.
He had all those creepy little octopus leggies stinging down that, and yeah, which is a very good idea to understand where what's his name got his idea for I'm sorry, my migraine, racist butthead, end of the world creature with the tentacle beard. I cannot think of the name of this cryptid now.
Think of an archway, Mama Maggie. Maybe that'll help.
I'm sorry. I apologize to everyone. I am on day 7 with none of my migraine medicine because it's on back order nationally. So,
Cthulhu?
Thank
you.
Typhon,
I drew a blank.
Typhon is where the idea for Cthulhu came from. So anyway, yeah, everything is stolen from the Greeks. Screw modern writing. Anyway, what was I saying? Oh yeah, buy my books, The Spartan Chimera, because it has Greek myth in it. So the ideas of the Nereids and the sea nymphs, there's the sea nymphs that live in the freshwater streams, and there's the ones that live in the ocean. And these were the ones that would use their voice, would swim in the water and use their voice to lure men to jump off of ships. Now, dolphins are often very, very respected in Greek mythology, but there is the question of, did dolphins clicking and whistling and singing on the sides of ships where people were suffering from scurvy, dehydration, sometimes like these ships would go out, they would have enough supplies for a week or 2 because moving food is bulky. So they if you were sailing across the Aegean, you would get like 1 meal a day. And if you hit a storm, if your fresh water got contaminated, people would start drinking seawater and they would start suffering severe dehydration and hallucinating.
Yes.
So this idea of these fish women was not related to the sirens until the English and the French convoluted the mythology coming in from along the Silk Road. And then sirens became an ocean elemental instead of an air elemental.
And also, when you consider, you touched on the water nymphs and sprites of different cultures, that's kind of where the Rusalaki come in just a little bit. And this is kind of, in my opinion, where you really get the true Little Mermaid. These are more like the water nymph type mermaids who are supposed to be helpful and friendly until you give them reason to be mad. I'm looking at you, Ursula, just saying. And they tend to be in the water. They tend to be gorgeous, but unless, like a dolphin, you wrong them, they're your friend kind of deal. And speaking of dolphins, are we ready to go to dolphins next, I think?
Oh, well, I was just going to say one last thing. I mean, this is a thing with time. You all know I'm obsessed with time because I write time travel fiction. The Little Mermaid was written in the 1830s. Think about
how it's much older, but
everyone thinks it's older now.
Yeah.
In Chaucer wrote a thing called the Nun's Priest Tale.
Yes,
and he mentions a sea maiden that almost lures him to his death, and that was written in 1390, according to my notes. And the Scandinavian folklores there is a Scandinavian folklore about the sea maidens or the sea people, the mermaid that are mermaid people that actually dates back to about 700, 800 Common Era. But the idea of the siren as the birds actually goes back probably 4,000, 5,000 years.
And I honestly think that the modern day interpretation that a lot of people have of a harpy is probably more akin to what an old siren really was.
Yes, harpies and sirens were two sides of the same coin.
Cousins. I would call them cousins even.
And once you throw in the sphinxes, then you have this whole array, which is going to be in our fins and feathers episode, where we're talking about the wings of things. You end up with this whole side shoot of things with wings, good or bad. But it wasn't until Chaucer, and then literally almost 450 years later, Hans Christian Andersen. This is when the swing happened, when sirens went from being these bird women to being fish women. And it all stems from the influence of the Silk Road bringing in these mythologies from India. I mean, in Japan, they have the Nigyano, which is a carp with a person's head. It's a kind of a demon thing. But as far as the torso being a woman and the tail being a serpent or a fish, that we have to go all the way back to India, to Thailand, to Cambodia, and to the Silk Road. And this is a myth that came on as colonialism, as the empires were spreading out in the 1350s through the 1600s, and they were bringing in these myths. The sailors were bringing back these myths with them.
And we all know, literally, tall fish tails, hyperboles. We know how sailors can be. And let's get real, they've been at sea for a very long time. No wonder they're wanting to see a pretty lady once in a while. Let's get real. Let's get really real. Kind of backing what you were saying to the dolphins talking to the people in the hull of the ship. I was just thinking, yeah, if that's a sick ship and people are in the hull, oh, I'm so sick. I'm so sick. The dolphins are going to hear that.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, this stuff that's coming in from India, as literally as the Western empires are reaching into these at the time the declining empires of the Eastern world, we also get this idea of the world turtle, or the cosmic turtle, or the world-bearing turtle, which is basically this myth that there is this tortoise or turtle that is literally carrying the world on its back. And Hindu mythology talks about this, and the writings go back, and I cannot speak Hindi, so I am not even going to try to pronounce these names. But it wasn't until John Locke, who is a British philosopher and anthropologist, began recording other mythologies of other people, that we learned this concept from them. And Chinese mythology includes the creator goddess Nua, who cut off the legs of the great turtle Ao, and used it to prop up the world. So we have this Chinese and Indian influenced mythologies about the world. Basically, the turtle was the Eastern version of the great tree. So if you think of Yggdrasil, the Norse tree that holds up the world and the heavens, that's what this turtle was to these cultures. And it moved. They understood that our solar system moved through the universe. And the reason is because the turtle was walking through the galaxy. And that's why the stars would shift. That's why We would see the different stars in different seasons because the turtle was moving.
And very similarly, even in modern times, you see a capture of this we were just talking about this before we were streaming in Finding Nemo. You see this in Crush and his League of People with kind of a play on the Hawaiian Hanu. These turtles all have the same thing in common. They are wise. They move fast if the ocean tells them to, but otherwise they move slow. It's kind of that old thought process of to move slow is to move fast, and to understand what's going on around you and not necessarily reacting to it, but performing in action with it and looking at divine timing. This is also in a lot of cultures where they say, oh, look, the back of the turtle shell relates to the number of moons we get a year, and so on and so forth. And you get a lot of moon storytelling in Native American culture too.
Well, and speaking of that, there is a Huron story up by the Great Lakes that the world is also moving around on the back of a turtle, and that if there's an earthquake, it's because the turtle has stumbled, and if there is a solar eclipse, it's because the turtle has changed its position or laid down and in such a way that has deprived the sun's light from the world for a short time. Because of the way the shell would move, the moon moves across the sun, it could very be understood as the shell of a turtle moving across, blocking that light out. So there are so many folklores that have this concept of the slow and we know turtles from Aesop's fables. We know slow and steady wins the race. This turtle is this very slow, plodding thing.
But I love Aesop because that's what Aesop's good at, those universal truths, and then telling them not necessarily in a culturally anchored way, but every culture gets it. And this is a prime example.
Yeah. And the thing is most cultures do not see turtles as being slow. They see them as being determined. They see them as turtles are wise because not only do they carry their home on their body, but they carry everything that they need within their soul. And so while turtles are looked at as wanderers, they are also an example of why you don't need all the stuff in the world, why you only need a few things that you can carry on your person, and that is all you need to be home. That is all you need to establish yourself anywhere you go. And if you look at like the turtle lore, like I have a Zuni turtle that my grandmother was given while she was traveling in the Southwest, like the week I was born. So I have always had this turtle ring with me. And in turtle people who are Turtle Clan people, regardless of whichever tribe they're in, are the people who can compartmentalize, the people that can carry burdens that no one else can carry, and everything they need, they can carry within themselves. So turtles have like strong medicine, to put it in a Western understanding way. And Native Americans are not the only ones who have this belief. We are not the only ones who see the turtle as being the ones that can carry the burdens of the entire world. It's in Hindu culture. It's in Chinese culture. It's in Zulu culture in Africa. So this is a very globalized concept of this world turtle.
And even in instances where some cultures give them a little bit more of a mischievous glint. I'm looking at you, Japan, and your childlike kappa creatures. They're not necessarily going to go blow up the world. They're going to be more like, let me make your tea not brew at the correct temperature so it tastes weird. It's tiny little things that will just make you trip up to slow down for the sake of refocusing and getting around those blocks. Angela, hello. Good to see you. Good to see you. And I'm just backing up here. This is so true. I don't know if you saw Rachel say this, Mama Maggie. You're such a wealth of knowledge. Thank you.
Oh, as my first associate's degree, before I even got my liberal arts degree, was anthropology and mythology. Because I was one of those people that history never made sense to me, names and dates and places, who cares? Until I started learning the anthropology behind it. And then it was then I began to care about history. Then it began to be interesting to me. Once I started learning the myths and stuff, then I began getting very interested in historical events, because in the mythology of a people, you can understand how they view the entire world. You know, we all wear our experience goggles. The things we've been through color the things we see in the world. We don't think about the fact that we wear mythology goggles. We wear religion goggles. We wear political goggles. Everyone, it's like the things like, I can't even remember the show. I'm so sorry, my brain.
That's okay.
The guy had all the different lenses, and he would like flip the different lenses on his goggles. It was in Atlantis.
Mole.
Was it Mole who
I think it was Mole, yes.
He would flip the different lenses, and that's the way we are. That's the way our perspective works. And literally it's a thing of our perception shapes the world. And there's this thing in anthropology that we call the stone and bone bias. And it is this westernized European bias that shaped most of the early anthropologists have been completely refuted and discredited. And it's because they were so in their own little westernized world, white man mindset, that when they went and encountered these indigenous cultures and indigenous religions in all of these other places of the world, they twisted it to fit their Judeo-Christian white guy narrative. So yeah, it's something that if you want to be a really good writer, you have to learn to peel off your goggles, because your bias will end up in your books, whether you expect them to or not.
And this is why I often tell people when I'm coaching, you really need to be careful how, not necessarily, you want to anticipate the feedback from your readers. That's always a writer's job, and we can never anticipate everything. Just try to be sensitive would be the term to it today. But I try to tell people, if you think it would make more than 10% of your audience angry, maybe you should only leave it in there if you're leaving it in there for a reason, to make a statement. And that is also why I tend to tell people, if you don't have an open mind, don't read my books. Yeah, for that very reason.
There's so many things in writing that devolves from mythology, and that things that come from politics, things that come from the media, things that come from our own internalized bias. There's a big thing they're talking about right now is all women writers have internalized misogyny.
Oh, right, right. And like half of the men who wrote stuff 100 years ago aren't anti-feminist at all. Nope, not at all, not at all, not at all.
And it's like, no, we are not all writing these things because we hate all other women. And so that's why when you're doing research on something, that's why, I left a Facebook group for indie authors, because the two people running the Facebook group did not think sensitivity readers needed to be a thing. They were my fellow Gen Xers, and I understand this attitude. But the thing is this is not the 1980s where you can say whatever you want to everybody you want, and it not get snapped as hate speech,
or as being considered that you're inviting a conversation you may or may not want to have.
Yeah. So yeah, just be aware. And if you're using these mythologies, if you're using these ideas, please be respectful. Please have awareness. It's like, in the Greek myths, literally you can see the Greek mythology about dolphins and how they save people in Anne McCaffrey with the shipfish.
And not all people consider even the same side of the coin. Like someone's good is someone else's bad, is where I'm going with
the
that.
Aztecs
so keep that in mind, very much so.
The Aztecs considered the dolphins to be negative things. They considered the dolphins to be dangerous. They considered that the dolphins were harmful. It was a story about in the Aztec, the Nahuatl and Mayan overlapping mythologies. They're not sure where this story comes, but there is a reason that young girls were not let go out on the boats, because the dolphins would knock them off the boats and bad things, do the SA things to the young girls. If a young girl went out on a boat, the dolphins would knock her off the boat and assault her. And this is because we actually know
dolphins were your mermen, apparently, to some cultures.
And we know this because we know from dolphin behavior studies now that dolphins will actually kidnap juveniles and females from other pods and essay them to death.
Yeah, and this is why you have most of your schools of dolphins, the only males among them are babies.
Yeah.
You have a bunch of basically finned mama bears hanging out with each other, and you dare come after one of those babies.
Yeah.
You dare.
And the thing is, though, is there will be packs, and they literally call them packs of juvenile and adult male dolphins that will swim and hunt together. And
they only do pairs. They only do pairs. At least around here on the East Coast, they do.
Down in the Mexican waters, they've seen these packs of male and juvenile male dolphins as large as 20. And there have been
if that's a mating ground. Then
there have been reports off the coast of Malaysia and over in the South Pacific and into the Indian Ocean of dolphins, of all male dolphin groups working together. And like there's actually a video like 10 or 15 years ago of this speedboat literally runs into this group of dolphins in the water and grabs this baby dolphin. The humans saved were from a research group, and they saved the baby dolphin that these adult dolphins were batting around like a beach ball.
That's normally a male trait because they'll do it to anger the females.
Yeah. And so dolphins, while they were considered beneficial and helpful,
it's usually the females who are, not the dude.
And then there's places where the dolphins are considered evil. And which brings us to the opposite side of another large oceanic predator. And we're going to talk about orcas. Now, orcas appear in all northern coastal mythologies, with one exception. Nazca in Peru, there is this huge desert, and you've all heard of the Nazca lines, the big carvings in the desert that you can see from space. And they've determined now that they believe that they were like, oh, you had to make them from space. You had to do this, this. Well, no, we've determined that using a grid system, if you draw like half of an image on a grid system, you can copy it identically on the other side of the grid system. Well,
like we did in elementary school art class.
Yeah, you fold the paper in half and you draw it. Well, there's a way you can do this on a grid map on a landscape level. And literally you have people and they walk the same distance. They turn the same distance. They walk back in the same distance. They walk back out the same distance. And they would create these prayer paths. And the different clans would go and walk through these prayer paths. And you can go to the Nazca Research Library website and look all of this up. It's very, very interesting. And it explains why some of the shapes are slightly off, because the person on this side's footsteps were a little bit longer than the person on this side's footsteps. So the shape would be slightly different by the time they met in the middle. The other interesting thing about the Nazca is there was a great drought down there during the medieval warm period when Europe was getting all this fabulous weather. The Nazca Empire of roughly 150 to 200,000 people hit this wall. They had a 50-year drought. And the winds changed, the rain stopped coming. And they have cities. They estimate 10 to 20,000 people lived in these cities for generations until the rain stopped. And there were two of the cities down in the desert that actually held on through the drought. But by the time the drought was finally waning, there just was not enough people to hang on. But the thing is there are no mass graves. And they always said, well, the Nazca must have eaten their dead or something, or cremated their dead. There's no mass graves, and we can't find evidence of great cremation things. But here's an interesting idea. So can I share screen? Let me
Go for it. Go for it.
Let me share some screen. I'm going to share some images with you. Pull that up. Hold on. I got to resize that. Okay. Present. Share screen. Okay. Can you see it? All right. This is an orca from the Nazca mythology. Now you can see these big scary teeth, and you can see these little face-like shapes inside of it. This is actually at the Nazca Museum down in Peru and Chile. They have a joint cooperation where they have this big museum with all these artifacts in it. And they have found literally in one section of one town, they have found hundreds of these because I guess they were the Orca clan. You can see here is the orca on the side of the mountain. Here's the people in the boat. And here in his stomach, the orca has people. The orca has eaten people in the stomach. So, yeah. Can I zoom in? Where's my zoom? Where's my zoom tool? It's not letting me zoom in. Okay. But you can see this. Now I'm going to show you something. No one knows what happened to the Nazca people. They left during the Great Drought. A few of them stayed behind, but no one knows what happened to the rest of them. But here's something interesting to look at. Do you see this?
They always show up in the footwear of that culture. It's so interesting.
These are helmets that you wear on your head. This is for a ceremony. You wear these on your head. But look at the teeth. Look at the faces on the side. Look at the human on the inside of it. These are Tlingit orcas.
And sometimes you'll see, there's a couple of artifacts that I've seen in other museums where similar designs, but they're like moccasin material, but like painted on. Does that make sense for like children?
Yeah, they'll bead them. But the similarity in this artwork is so incredible. And interestingly enough, orcas are one of the few things you will not see on a totem. That this is a sculpture that is made. It shows Raven. Raven is riding on Orca's back as Orca is swimming. Here's the sad little person in the Orca. Here's the white spot for the eye on the Orca's fin. Orcas were not friendly. be respectful with orcas. And the orcas are considered the wolves of the sea, not just by Westerners, but also by Native Americans too. They are the enforcers. Like if you have an impure heart and you go out on a boat to go fishing,
you're not coming back. You're going to be orca food.
The orcas will hurt you. Orcas will push boats if there's a storm coming in. There are Tlingit stories of orcas pushing canoes back to shore. And that is why the Tlingit people do not hunt orcas, because they are their brothers. So yeah, there's a lot of Native American mythology about orcas. And here's the thing about orcas. Orcas are a matriarchal society. We now know this from decades and decades and decades of studying orcas. Orcas are considered the matriarch of the orca pod, and her daughters are basically, her daughters and nieces and sisters are basically in charge of that pod. If a male wants to join the pod, he mates into the pod, he leaves his own pod. If a male is born into an orca pod, they are driven as a teenager. They're like, okay, boys, have a good time. Off you go.
Very, very Amazonian.
They have a very, very stable matrilineal family groups. And the Native Americans in the Northwest were not the only ones to notice this, because the Japanese, also the northern islands of Japan and the shores of Korea and up into what is now China and Russia, all the native cultures in those areas recognize orcas as being the lords of the oceans, as being the judges of the sea. There were some samurai houses that actually, because they believed in the orcas knew the hearts of men, they actually took an orca as their symbol of justice and judging, because of the way these animals behave. And they talk about right now that there are several cases of orcas attacking and damaging yachts, which happened near Spain. They were talking about, why are these orcas attacking? And it wasn't attacking all boats. It was very specific boats. And in a way,
have oosh shiny syndrome with what they choose to go after. It's very specific.
The people on these boats were doing bad things, like throwing trash into the ocean, killing animals, like catching and just killing them and throwing them back and stuff like that. But orcas and part of it was they were getting close to mating grounds and birthing grounds. And they were told you can't drive your boat through there, but the rich people are like, I'll do what I want. I got money.
Attention to the rules.
And so they go through there, and the orcas were actually causing tens of thousands of dollars of damage to these multi-million-dollar yachts. And the orcas were getting hurt, but the orcas were like, "Freak you, bitch!" And yeah, pretty much. And it's like you don't mess with orcas, and there's like orcas have been known to drag in west coast of the United States, the Inuit tribes, and the Tlingit tribes, all of the tribes that are up in there, what are called the Eskimos or the Anis, they literally will say, if you are a person with a bad heart or a bad soul, do not get in the water when the orcas are close, because they will drag you out and kill you. So yeah, orcas highly respected, but this mythology, and there's stories of orcas saving people. There's stories of orcas going and getting sailors, like fishermen and stuff up in Alaska, they will go and they'll bump their boats and they'll swim away and they'll come back and lightly bump them, and then swim away and come back. And it's like, okay, I have to follow this orca. Something's wrong. And the fishermen would follow the orca, and they would find like an orca tangled in a drift net, or they would find a baby orca that had gotten too close to shore and the tide had pulled out and the baby orca was stuck on the rocks.
There's stories of dolphins on occasion doing similar too, but I always ask, are you sure it wasn't an orca that they were talking about?
And
because those two get mixed up a lot in their stories.
Well, and the other thing is there's also porpoises, which are their own, which are different than dolphins and orcas. And like there's a porpoise family that actually they for years they were misidentified as orcas. They were like Herman's small orcas or something. Right. They were like considered miniature orcas, and then once they got the blood and started doing DNA on it, then they were like, oh wait, these are actually orcas. Or these aren't orcas, these are actually porpoises. So yeah, there's a lot of different things. But when you think about the fact that these animals would help sailors get to shore, you can understand where this idea of mer people came along, of the helpful mer people, the beneficial mer people. And then, what we talked about earlier about people starving, them, they're drinking contaminated water. They don't have enough vitamin C and iron. They start hallucinating because they've got scurvy and the like. And that's where the siren mermaids come into play. And so it's very interesting how the mythology of the ocean and the oceanic creatures are actually based on, and this goes back to the old saying, someone's fact is someone else's myth.
Very much so. Very much so. And I think that'd be a good note to ask for final questions. What do beluga and narwhal fit? Mama Maggie. I was hoping we were going to get away without talking about narwhals today. I think that's its own episode unto itself, Rachel.
Okay.
Would you put that with them or with unicorns? That's where I'm really at here, because I almost put them in with today, and I'm like,
see, narwhals have a very there were narwhals in the North Atlantic and narwhals in the Arctic Ocean and over into the Bering Sea. There's a few stories about them in Chinese mythology, and narwhals, in European things, it's like, oh, they're the unicorns of the sea. But when you get over into other mythologies, narwhals hurt people.
Unicorns aren't nice either, is why I was like, do we put them
don't
together
get into
or
unicorns.
not?
I hate unicorns. I'm glad they're finally making a murder corn movie so everyone knows the truth about unicorns.
Finally. There's a reason why they're the national animal of the most brutal people to come from the British Isles, Scotland.
Yeah. But narwhals, we can, oh my goodness. Just to sum up, if you find a narwhal horn, get rid of it as quickly as possible. They are, and if you can find someone who's dumb enough to say, oh, unicorn horn, buy this, sell it as quickly as possible. Narwhals are cursed beings. And actually narwhals are very smart. They're very intelligent. They are very problem solving. But the problem is they have sword heads and they have no idea about this giant tooth sticking out of their face that they actually use as a sensor to find prey to eat. But unfortunately, it's like the thing with longhorn cows. Longhorn cows are so nice and they're so docile, and you can like squinch their faces because they're so sweet, but they'll turn their head and impale you and kill you.
And be like, oh, sorry, dude, I didn't mean it.
They're like, oh, you're bleeding now. I just turned my head. They don't realize that they have these great big giant things with sharp points sticking out of their
horns
face.
have Herculean strength too, because I don't know how far out any nerve endings go, if you get my meaning.
Yeah.
So they might whack you and not even feel it.
And you know, and it's like narwhals don't mean to impale things. They're just curious. You know, they should come with a bell, you know, or a rattle, like a rattlesnakes have rattles.
At least they're so kind.
Yeah, but it's yeah, narwhals. There's a lot of myths about narwhals killing people, and unfortunately, we don't know of some of these stories. There are stories about great narwhals that were basically the size of like gray whales, and that they would ram ships and knock them and sink them. And it's like, we don't know if these animals ever actually existed or they were just old fishermen's tales, because unfortunately, during the whaling years, we lost 80 to 90% of our whale species, not just whales total, whale species that went extinct because we were burning whale oil before we discovered we could burn fossil fuels.
I mean, the trade out still is harmful to Mother Gaia either way. Let's get real there, Mama Maggie. We need something better. So, any other questions? Otherwise, I think we'll get ready to wrap up and wind down. Next time is feathers, fins, and so on. I won't mess that up. And I think we're on the 20th. Yes, Mama. Oh, that's the spring equinox. So I think our next time we're hanging out is the 20th. If that works for Mama Maggie, that works for me.
If they can get my migraine medicine or something else, I will be fabulous. But no, I apologize for how muddle-minded I am, because I'm just like, I am suffering right now. So yeah, but no, there's orcas are friends, not food. Dolphins peek under their skirt before you trust them. Narwhals don't mean to impale you.
Wait a minute. Dolphins wear kilts? Wait a minute.
Just saying.
That gives my Scottish vampire a whole new meaning. Oh my God.
Well, and you know, and just remember, turtles aren't slow and stupid. They're just determined. They're determined, and and they're not as fast as other animals, but they keep going until they get to their destination, and they carry everything that they need inside of them. And mermaids, nereids, the English decided, the lonely Englishmen decided they needed boobies on the front of their ships. And
it used to be dragons. Why not a girl with Barnes and Noble?
Well, you know, the French get lonely easily. I mean, we've got mountains here in Colorado. They call the twin sisters are they were called the twin sisters because they're supposed to look like boobies. And I'm sorry, but if your boobies look like that, you need to see a doctor.
Very badly, much badly.
Yes.
And I think on that note, Mama Maggie, we have an outro for you, and we will get you some relief and some rest.
Curious about my take on mythology? Please check out the Spartan Chimera. It is twisted myth, Greek mythology, and it's my kind of way of explaining why there are so many different versions of Greek myths. In this, I have the Nereids as they turn into mermaids. They are shifters that turn into women when they get on land, and they turn into mermaids when they get in the water. But they are more of the terrifying things that will eat you if you fall into the sea. And they're Pelagia's friends. So yes. Spartan Chimera is AU mythology, the great game of the gods. Zeus keeps restarting it because he's unhappy with how it ends, and that's why the whole world is slowly going mad. And so Ares makes a bet with him. I bet I can bring peace and end war for a generation with just one piece. And Pelagia is that piece.
Thank you all for hanging out with me and Mama Maggie. Thank you for doing this. If you weren't well, you could have said, Jenna, you do it solo, but thank you for being here, especially that you're not doing well.
I have the research in tabs on my, I have like tabs, like 8 different sets of tabs set up for these. So pulling one set of tabs or another, not a problem for me because I love mythology. I love how it enriches our stories. I love how it can like change our worldview from the little box we grew up in. Climb out of the box. Climb out of the box.
Please do.
Take off your goggles.
So.
And then take off your other goggles. And then take off your other goggles.
Definitely so. Definitely so. And if you want to read my books, which basically take everything Shakespeare thought he knew about mythology and loves to make fun of it a couple of times a book at minimum by requirement, go ahead and check them out. My website for the books is live along with all the memberships and have a free ebook on us. Before it goes wild.
Join me in the I Hate Bjorn Club.
Or in the case of other people in chat, since we mentioned France, and it's, what did you say, Mama Maggie? It's
France and its obsession with boobies.
What's phrase use in that case?
The Frenchman. Oh, fun fact: French high heels were invented for men in France. Corsets were invented for men in France. Makeup was invented for men in France. So all the things we use for beauty today were invented for Frenchmen.
Sorry, ladies. We need to stop keeping up with the French times. And by that way, I mean the Frenchmen and invent some new fashion decor. That's another mythology all unto its own. On that note, see you later. Take care of you. You've been worth it from the beginning. Dang it.
You should know, only fools tread where the angels fear to go, but you keep trying to get too close. Save myself by turning into stone. So